Biden bill removes many work requirements for many of the payments that are being made to people, and it's incentivizing people not to go back to work, which is why we have 10 million open jobs in the United States and people not coming back to work.
That is not what that bill does. In fact, that's not what that bill
does.
Are you talking about the right?
You made a mention a moment ago of people immigrating to the country for the benefits. That's just abjectly untrue.
In this video, we're going to watch a debate between Ben Shapiro and Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks a few years ago. Now, Ben Shapiro absolutely destroys her in this particular instance, but I actually do like Anna, and it's not the greatest representation of her. So with that, let's get into the clips.
The rich is a very popular sentiment. It's also now a fashion statement, I guess, which we've all seen. So when President Biden looks into the microphone and says, pay your fair share, what does that mean?
It means that if you're one of the 55 corporations that literally paid absolutely nothing in federal income taxes in 2020, and in fact received $3.5 billion in tax refunds or rebates, or tax refunds, I should say, maybe you should pay your fair share. But here's the thing, if the tax code is written in a way where corporations can legally take advantage of loopholes and incredibly low effective corporate tax rates, they're going to do it, right? So it's one thing to say pay your fair share. It's another thing to actually write a tax code that is a little more equitable and ensures that everyone is, in fact, paying their fair share.
Ben, what's pay your fair share mean?
I mean, the obvious answer would be a flat tax, but the longer answer is that the United States has one of the most progressive income tax systems on planet Earth. Most of the systems in, for example, Northern Europe are far less progressive. The top tax rate kicks in a lot lower on the income scale because you have to pay for the large-scale social services. The people who are at the top of the income bracket in the United States, the top quintile, essentially pays all net taxes in the United States. Not some, not most, all. And the reason for that is because there are tax transfers, and the transfer of payments that are inherent in public services do not accrue to the people at the top of the tax bracket. They accrue to everybody else who's receiving that sort of funding. When we talk about higher taxes on corporations, we do not have one of the world's lowest corporate tax rates. We are somewhere in the middle. Looking at the OECD countries, we are certainly not the lowest on the totem pole in terms of our corporate tax rate. In fact, right-wing sources like the Heritage Foundation will say that it is much friendlier to do business in places like Denmark or Sweden in many cases than it is to do business in the United States.
Tax rate's pretty high in Denmark and Sweden.
It is. The personal income tax rate is very high in Denmark and Sweden. The corporate tax rate is basically near or on par with that of the United States. If we were to raise our corporate tax rate the way that President Biden is talking about, we'd actually have a higher corporate tax rate than China currently does. The notion that corporations ought to be paying tax at all, in my view, is mistaken, given the fact that the income is immediately either reinvested in the company or passed on to people who immediately pay all of that tax. By the time you actually receive your income in this country, the income's been taxed about 7 different ways. Right? You're getting taxed through the corporation, then it's passed on to you as salary, which is taxed. If you invest it in the stock market and then you sell your stock, that is taxed as capital gains tax. When you die, the government taxes that as well. So how many times can you tax the same dollar before people begin to disinvest?
Now, this is one that conservatives just have 100% correct in my opinion. And Ben is on the money here. Taxing the rich, exorbitant amounts of money like AOC has on her stupid dress, and what leftist YouTubers sit around talking about, is one of the dumbest things that you can say. And oftentimes they mean like 80% income tax. And in Australia, let's just take a builder, for example. You have to pay company income tax of around 20%. And then you'll have to pay your own personal income tax of around 50%. And then you'll have to pay capital gains tax. So any money that you've made from your investments, which is another 50%. Plus you have a land tax at the end of every calendar year, which is a percentage of your property that you have to pay in tax, if you're lucky enough to own a property. And then the local council will come along and take their slice of the pie for no good reason. And there are more and more and more random arbitrary taxes. And then you look at the price of materials post-COVID and then other overheads. And then all of a sudden you're left with a fraction of the profit for yourself. And God forbid you make a mistake and you have to re-pour a concrete slab or redo a roof. You are in big trouble. It's already hard enough to get ahead these days, let alone the taxes then going up even more. But the point is here that these leftists who sit around saying tax the rich have zero understanding of what it takes to run a business, especially a practical business. In terms of difficulty, skill, and importance to the world, these businesses that build everything you see around you are worlds and worlds more important than your YouTube channel. Believe me. And would you rather that money be in the hands of somebody who's building a business, solving problems, and adding to the economy, or the liberal arts degree of some blue-haired Marxist who's going to go out into the world and just become an activist? If you're trying to run a business and you're already getting taxed out the wazoo, it's hard enough as it is, let alone somebody trying to take 80% of your profit. If that were the case, then so many businesses would just collapse and everybody would have to just work for a giant corporation or rely on the government. But hey, that's probably what they want.
Let me.
I'd like to respond to that, though.
Okay, go ahead. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
To argue that the corporate tax rates in the United States are too high, or that, I mean, first off, let me just touch on the comparison you gave regarding progressive taxes in European countries versus the United States. I mean, yes, the taxes might be higher in those European countries, but what do people living in those countries get in return? They get incredible childcare. I mean, listen, the average American family, two-income household, spends a whopping 22% of their household income on childcare alone, right? So when you're talking about European countries that offer quality childcare, that, by the way, that opens up the opportunity for people to go to work, something that we should maybe think about as we're dealing with this labor shortage. 64,000 women left the job force in April alone. Not because they want to, but because they can't afford childcare. Everything in this country is privatized. Everything has a for-profit model. And there's consequences that come along with that, including for the business community that might want, a more robust social safety net program, or social safety net to ensure that people feel comfortable enough to go to work. But we don't have that here.
Guys, quick announcement for the channel. We are back up and about on Locals. I've got some exclusive content happening over there because YouTube's actually blocking some of my content when I talk about more controversial matters and individuals who have been banned. So there's going to be more exclusive content over there on Locals. And if you guys do join up and become members, it provides a bit of security for myself and the brand in the face of demonetization, shadow banning, and also cancellation. And I've also got some massive plans for the coming months for my Locals community. So I really appreciate your support, guys. And back to the clips.
So yes, people might pay more in taxes, including those lower on the income scale, but what they get in return is far greater than what people in this country have been getting.
The United States has spent, since the beginning of the war on poverty, some $22 trillion in the war on poverty. We spend an awful lot on social services in this country on a per capita level. In fact, it is very much on par with what the European countries spend. It's just not spent particularly well. When it comes to things like child care, a very young Elizabeth Warren, before she became Senator Elizabeth Warren, specifically wrote about universal child care, and she said that it actually was contributing to what she called the two-income trap in a book that she wrote in the early 2000s. And what she talked about is the fact that there are a lot of women who, for example, may not want to work, and what you're actually doing is incentivizing people to have to go to work because you are now providing child care, as opposed to providing a competitive advantage to, for example, families where one parent is working. I agree with you, by the way, that child care is a very difficult issue. I also agree that this is why we used to have, for example, family structures that were conducive to allowing people to help out. There are many businesses that do provide for some form of child care. We certainly have many businesses that provide for some form of maternity or paternity leave. The European countries, which obviously have been used as a model by a lot of folks on the left, between 1970 and 1993, they experienced exorbitantly low rates of growth. And the reason for that was because they radically overburdened their social safety net systems. It created enormous social problems. It created enormous immigration problems. They had to scale a lot of those back. And
why would it create immigration problems?
It created immigration problems because a lot of people were coming specifically for the benefits.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes, that would be to my point, which is it creates more problems very often than it's
sure, I guess that's a
yes. If I put a free donut sign in my shop, people will come for the donuts.
No, but if you have a robust.
If I have a sign outside my shop saying free donuts, people are going to come and take the donuts. Ben Shapiro. Gotta love him. And this is another thing that the left will constantly campaign for. Universal childcare. Send your kids to the hands of the government. Great idea. And in the modern world, guys, the price of childcare for a family who has a two-income household, that is a massive problem. But for me, I think that comes down to the breakdown of the family, and it's my personal subjective opinion. So let me know what you guys think about this. If you watch the channel, you know that I'm Italian. I'm currently in Italy, living here for a little while. And one of the things that I've noticed, I mean, I've always kind of known this, is that the family structures of Italian families, and of many other cultures for that matter, is vastly, vastly different to that of Australians and Americans and English, etc. Here, the family structures are so much stronger. They hang out together, they eat together every night. They look after each other, they look after their parents, they pool their wealth, and in general are just a lot closer because they can't actually afford to do it themselves because the wages here are so much lower. They really rely on each other. Whereas I find that in the more wealthy, liberal Western countries, people tend to go their own way a lot more. They tend to move out of home at 18, they go and study a degree, have a career, talk to their parents once a month, they barely know their grandparents. And I think that this is because they can afford to do so, because wages are much higher and it's a much more livable situation. They say it takes a village to raise a child. And for most of the world, that's actually how things work. When the mother can't be around for whatever reason, the grandparents will step in and take care of the child. But in the West, when the mother can't be there, they give their children over to the government, or they give their children over to daycare centers. And whichever way you look at it, they might be a really great daycare center. It's someone else raising your child. And there are potential consequences for that. And hey, it's tough. And not all people have the luxury of being able to have a one-income household. But I do think that besides from the economic problem, it's actually a problem that we have with family, and that we're not close enough with our families. But like I said, interested to know your thoughts on that.
If you have a society that actually takes care of its workers, right? If you have a society that makes your life a lot easier, people are going to want to immigrate. It's part of the reason why people wanted to come here. People are going to want to live in countries that have both economic opportunity, but also social safety net programs that, again, just make your, I mean, we talk about freedom. If you look at the World Freedom Index, okay, we like to think of the United States as the freest country. We're not the freest country. You look at that list, we're like pretty low down compared to a lot of these Nordic countries. Denmark is top of that list. So look, Denmark has a mixed economy. When we have these debates about, socialism versus capitalism, I think that those debates are a little ridiculous because every country is not every country, but most countries are mixed economies.
Right. The United States is a mixed economy. For sure,
exactly.
Yep.
Now, the issue with the United States is there used to be a time when public universities were free, right? You didn't have to dig yourself into a massive hole to get an education. There was a time in this country where there was universal child care. That was cut down to the point where it's like no longer in existence unless you're desperate and have like no money and need to take advantage of some programs that are available in some states. But my point is, like, we have an issue here where on one hand, we're experiencing a labor shortage. We want people to go back to work. On the other hand, people literally can't afford the childcare necessary in order to put their kids in a daycare, put their kids in childcare, and be able to go to work without their entire paycheck.
The Biden bill removes many work requirements for many of the payments that are being made to people, and it's incentivizing people not to go back to work, which is why we have 10 million open jobs in the United States and people not coming back to work.
That is not what that bill does. In fact, that's not what that
bill.
Are you talking about the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill?
I am talking about the $3.5 trillion bill.
The $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill offers universal pre-K, which opens up the opportunity for mothers to go to work if they want to go to work. The $3.5 trillion bill, by the way, has all sorts of subsidies for corporations, which I don't really understand why the business community isn't salivating over that, because rather than just going full force with public programs, which I think would be the right way to go, it's offering all sorts of subsidies in these, public-private partnerships. Now, the physical infrastructure bill has a lot more corporate giveaways, which is why the, business community absolutely loves it, offers the chance to privatize public infrastructure, which is why the business community absolutely loves it. But at the end of the day, if we don't create a society where Americans can actually have families and go to work, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
So to go back to your immigration point, you made a mention a moment ago of people immigrating to the country for the benefits. That's just abjectly untrue. The fact is that the United States' great immigration growth throughout the beginning of the Republic, all the way up through about 1930, was entirely driven by people who were leaving places that in many cases had broader benefits, places like Germany, to come to the United States where there was no social safety net. The fact is that the vast majority of people who used to leave and come to the United States were coming specifically to build a life knowing that they really didn't have a lot of social safety net. Now, that's not an argument that there shouldn't be some state and local possibility for social safety net, but the notion that the way that you build a successful country that is a world power and is capable of not only making sure that its citizens are taken care of, but essentially making sure that the entire Western world is taken care of, which we did throughout the Cold War. The idea that you do that simply by raising the number of social security payments that you're making to people or benefit payments that you're making to people, this is the way that you build that sort of economy, is just non-borne out by empirical
Okay, we've
fact.
had a real far-ranging conversation.
Correct. People come to these countries for opportunities. The American dream is about opportunity. The American dream isn't about social welfare. People want to be able to get a good job that pays really well, maybe start a business. And also, the social safety nets and being looked after is another positive. But there aren't many people who are moving to Nordic countries to be looked after by the government. I mean, what kind of a goal is that? And the kind of people who do want to just move to a country to just milk the country for their welfare and resources are not the kind of people that you really want immigrating to your country. And also, people aren't moving to these Nordic countries because they're more culturally homogenous. They're stricter with immigration, which is another reason why their social safety nets can be so robust. And also, countries like Norway are fracking like it's going out of fashion. But I guess the left want to omit those details. So guys, if you did enjoy this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you guys want to watch another video, click right here. Until next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.